recording. Yay, Simon. Good evening, and thanks very much for doing a talk photography with us and things. Really, we've got about 175 who've pre-registered, so that's a really good start to the night, and we'll have people coming in now as well, live and things. So thanks everybody for joining us. I know these topics are all over the place as far as who speaks when, but it is about diaries. Okay, I do apologize. Before we get going, we always do like a pre-chat, Simon, if that's okay, to get to know you and get to know your background. And I know this background in performing arts and everything else with it and things, really. But tell us how you got into the wonderful world of photography, will you? And kind of what tonight's going to be about.
It's a slightly convoluted story. As a kid, I had a 110 film camera my father gave me, and I got all his cast-off cameras, and he taught me the basics, exposure, aperture, all of the business. And I carried on until I went to college. I went to study maths, and I realised after a bit that I hadn't really got anything I wanted to take photos of. I did all the usual things, steam trains, flowers, whatever, but they weren't for me. Then after a couple of maths degrees, I realised I didn't want to be a mathematician anymore. And I literally ran away to join the circus. I became a performer, a juggler, acrobat, stilt walker, dancer. And in those days, we really weren't business-like enough about selling our skills. We made a meager living around the edges. So we carried on doing that, mainly teaching acrobatic stuff, while my wife and I got full-time jobs. We still did perform, and quite prestigious events, but we never set about trying to do it hard. And then as age and injuries and pies kind of arrived, and children, there wasn't really the opportunity to train as much as we used to or perform anymore. And I started photographing performers, and that introduced me to the world of studios and working with models and fashion, and there we are. So I've got a physicsy, mathsy background, which has always made me appreciate the technical stuff a bit. I've got a performing background, which makes me appreciate people moving interestingly.
Very good. So is photography the day job, or is
as of April this year it is. I was a software engineer for a good 20-something years. I was 4 days a week software and 2 photography, and I've now gone completely photography.
So what are you focusing in on now for your photography?
Dance,
kind of business?
very much dance. Everything from dance schools to dance schools to portfolios for dancers, whatever, location stuff, studio stuff, whatever comes along. I'm still keeping my hand in the fashion side, and I'm doing a lot of teaching, mainly one-to-one teaching. I really enjoy teaching. I've had a lot of practice at teaching acrobatic stuff, so I know how to teach, I think, for some people anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. Mainly dance. I know how to make a living doing that. Making money out of fashion photography is a bit of an art, I think. It's about who you know, not what you know.
Oh, absolutely guaranteed. Tell us about kind of what tonight we're expecting to actually learn, because I know it's about making versus taking, isn't it? Really, is the kind of the subheading.
I can come back to this. I think I get really mildly irritated when people say, "Oh, great capture." It's not capture. I've made a picture. I put some effort into creating this moment, this space where me and the person in front of the camera can combine to do this thing. I haven't captured it. I've made it, and I've helped somebody else make it too. So it's about that process, I think, is how I think about it. I don't take pictures, I make them. And there's lots of ways of making them. So we'll see where we go. We go anyway. We chat about anything. I can work up an opinion on anything in 5 minutes. But, yeah.
Oh, a man with an opinion, we like those.
They're not all right, but I can do it.
It's almost as good as a woman with an opinion, to be honest. So it's anyway. Were there specific moments in your kind of performance career that inspired you for particular photo projects of the future, do you think? Can you look back and kind of look at what you're doing today at all?
Sort of. I think I would have been a different performer with my current photography experience too, though. I think now I much value the expressiveness and freedom that comes from something rather than impressive tricks impressive tricks. I would much rather someone be expressive. I adore, well, last year I didn't enjoy it, but I adore Strictly, just because I like watching people learn to express themselves through a physical skill. I've been through that. I know what it's like, and it's a really heartwarming thing to see, where people just get it. They realise they're not just doing the moves; they're putting themselves out there for everyone to see. So I'm looking for some of that.
I'm glad one of us likes Strictly anyway, because my wife does, and I was forced into the ballroom dancing training with her for a year, and it was just like, it was something that I pretended to enjoy, put it like that.
I don't really like the cheese of it, but it's just a process of people learning to express themselves. It's charming.
No, it's a light bulb moment for many of them with their heart, isn't it? Really, I get it, honestly. I do. As far as the experience in performance art is concerned, has it changed the way you interact with the models? I know you said you look backwards, and if you were kind of understanding it from a performer's point of view, how you would be more expressive, but flip the coin. Has it changed the way that you actually treat them and interact with them, do you think?
Totally. I don't know, you'd have to talk to the models I work with. For me, a good photo shoot feels very much like a dress rehearsal. It's a shared creative endeavor. We're both striving towards some goal. There's not quite the pressure of doing it in front of a live audience, except if you've got a big team on a commercial shoot or something. That's another story. Yeah. But it's very much a collaboration. You're bouncing ideas off each other. I have to provide as much energy, I feel, as the model does. If I don't do that, then they will go flat too. I was reading a book about George Hurrell, a Hollywood photographer of the 40s, and apparently he was an absolute lunatic in the studio who would bounce all over the place and be absolutely gripping the set at the end of the shoot. So yeah, the photographer's energy really matters. It needs to be controlled, but it really matters, I think, and that comes definitely from performance.
Do you think understanding? So do you think that you have a better understanding of body and form and shape based on your kind of background now, actually, in the world of photography? Do you think you really have an advantage there?
Yeah, definitely, especially with moving things. I haven't included the picture in this slide deck, but there's one picture I've got of a diver taking the instant her hands hit the water. So it looks like she's doing a handstand on the water. It took 2 attempts because I'm so used to watching somebody move under gravity, to fall, to throw. I know what I'm looking at, and I know what looks good with a pointed toe or the shape of a hand. You don't want, I have a much clearer. Sometimes I might be limiting that because I've got a fixed idea of what I'm after, but I think it helps.
Right, we'll jump straight into an image because I've got loads of questions here. And thanks very much. My team who kind of submit questions in. You're good ones today. Brilliant. So our first image are the couple.
Acrobalance, Pavel and Ola. So my wife and I taught them this move. We used to do this stuff all the time. Yeah. What do you want me to say?
Well,
you don't
what's it about? How's it come about?
So you don't get many goes at taking a picture like that. I just wanted to show, it's almost like product photography. For me these days, it's a little bit stiff. Oh, there we go. It's just shows the shape and the form. It's almost a geometrical exercise. I think I prefer to do this sort of thing on location these days. It kind of makes more sense of it. It's less inanimate. But it's an interesting thing to photograph because you can't do it many times. You can't hold it for very long. So what I would do, I'd get them to show me the pose on the ground, go, okay, now I'll just visualize that. And I know this pose anyway. And then I would set the lights up how I think they were going to be. And I'd get them to stand in roughly the right place, but not do the pose at full strength. And I'd use a light meter because it saves time. And then after that, you just do the thing, watch it, and press the button. It doesn't take many attempts at all. I might say point a bit harder to Ola to really see her toes aren't quite pointed there. If I was teaching, I'd be shouting to point your toes. And then Pavel, I had to get him to adjust his head position. He had his head beautifully backwards originally, but the big octa there was creating uplighting on his face, which wasn't very pretty. So I just got him to drop the line of his head a little.
Yeah.
This took a couple of attempts because I realised after looking at the back of the camera that there was no light on Ola's face, which is what that little speed light's on the floor for.
Very good. So you're using gridded boxes and everything else with it and things, really. Do you usually control the light so tightly?
Yeah, nearly always, unless I'm being deliberately loose and random with it. yeah, why wouldn't you control it if you can? I think.
Okay, for those who don't know, do you want to explain the difference between a kind of a normal softbox and a gridded box?
I would say it helps me to think of each light having one job. If I hadn't put a grid on it, then those softboxes would be doing two jobs. They'd be lighting the background and be bouncing around and doing some fill. Whereas with the grids on, they're each doing just the one job. Yeah, you see the big octas lighting Ola and Pavel. There's the rim light. There's the light on the floor. And that makes it much easier to control things and not get in a mess, I think. As soon as you have a light doing more than one job, you try and adjust it, it changes what it's doing for one of those two jobs.
Yeah. So do you have a kind of a working aperture that you like to hit with this kind of image for depth of field? What kind of lens do you
think about it? If I've got the power in the lights, I'd go down to f4. If I didn't, for something more dynamic, I'd shoot a bit wider, and then I could turn the lights down and they'll recycle faster. With the modern mirrorlesses with their eye tracking, I tend to shoot quite a lot faster, but not for this kind of thing. This kind of thing, I'll probably have it on a tripod, and I won't be looking through the viewfinder as they do the trick. I know my frame, right? I know I'm focused. At F8, I can focus on the box. And then I don't have to touch the camera again. Don't have to touch the lights. I can come out from behind it. I can chat to the subjects, go, do this, do that, and then just press the button when it's right. You can really, much easier to look with your eyes than through this kind of 1/4-inch square little piece of glass. If you can come out from behind it, that's my tip for the top.
So questions just come through about metering for this shot. Yeah. Could you explain the setup if you can remember? So I suppose it's where you meter from and what kind of aperture. If it was based on f8, let's say, what the lights behind would actually be recorded and so on.
I'm not sure I can remember that one. Unfortunately, it would have been f8 at Pavel's face, and then the octa behind would have been feathered. You can't see from there, but it's actually feathered off Ola rather, so it won't be hitting her directly, and it is almost in line with her feet. It's not quite as far back as it looks. So it kind of wraps around and over the top of her leg a bit. But she was in the edge of the light, so because she's so much closer to the softbox, you don't want her in the full power of it. When Pavel's that much further away, you can point it directly at him. So it's using the edge of the light, using the inverse square law. It's surprisingly precise. An inch will make a big difference with this kind of thing. I don't know whether I got lucky that we got it quickly. I didn't have to ask them to do the pose a million times, or whether it was just knowing what they were doing and what I was trying to achieve.
And would the strip box be metered in the same amount, or do you did the separation light, is it less for you, or how does it work?
I haven't got a standard. I will have tweaked it until I thought that looked about right. If I'd had more time, I think I would have put it up higher and aimed it downward, so it's affecting the top of Pavel's head as well as the back. But as I say, there are only so many times you can ask someone to try a move like this before you have to move on. So,
okay. Yeah. And questions coming through about kit. What kind of kit are you shooting with at present? Are you mirrorless, did you say, or?
I've just gone mirrorless. I started, well, when I got back into digital, I started with a mirrorless. I started with an Olympus. Then I moved to Nikon because I liked the tethering and I wanted full frame. And I've just recently, it's only recently Nikon, I think, have got the eye focus really working properly on the Z8 and the Z9. And now I use, for most things, Z8. I'd prefer it if it didn't have quite so many pixels. I don't need that many. Yeah. But the eye focusing is extraordinary.
There was a question later on about tethering. In fact, let me just go and find that one now from one of the group. What's the tethering question? I'll find it when we chat about the next image, perhaps, and things really. So this next image of the model, fashion shoot.
This is much more recent, and this is me trying to get away from having everything square onto the camera. I really like including lights in shot. They add a sense of depth and framing. I do it a lot, especially with strip boxes. There's been a little bit of Photoshop work on the strip box to tidy up the edges. And there's some details on this one which were planned. So the top of the roll of the paper, you can see at the very top of the frame. There's a curved shadow on the wall behind Sada. They were all planned. I knew they were going to be there from the key light. And then it took a little while to find an angle that worked with her framed nicely in front of the strip box and with me on the ground and filling the frame. And then I asked her to do awkward shapes with her arms, just to play and see what she came up with. And she's an extraordinary model.
This is very much a grey and white image rather than the black and white image. Is the contrast purposely kind of almost grade one in the old days, as it were?
I like the gradation. I think I do like to have both black and white in a black and white image. There are some near true blacks in here. But for me, I think the kind of the texture on the collarbone and the cheekbones, that's where the eye goes. It's those details, because it's actually quite a minimal image. It's not a lot going on.
Okay, I found that question about the tethering. How do you use tools like tethering on set to ensure precise control over the exposure?
I do with I use a light meter on set to ensure precise control if I need to. I prefer to do that than tether, because tethering, it's not brilliantly reliable if you're setting up and taking down all the time, I think, or if you're moving around a lot. And it does tie you to one spot a bit. It's great for things like the previous shot, where you sat in one place with your camera on a tripod, but moving around, it will go wrong at some point during a shoot, is my experience. So I don't rely on
tether then, as a rule?
I do tether often, but I don't rely on it. I especially tether for things like dance shoots. I wouldn't for fashion shoots, and I shoot very quickly these days, and most tethering can't keep up. Even if I'm downloading large JPEGs off the Z8, it tends to lag rather. So I don't.
What are you shooting? What software do you shoot to?
So I was for a long time using something called Smart Shooter, which is very cheap, sold by Tether Tools, and directly into Lightroom. These days I just use NX Tether, the Nikon free thing. I try to capture on it much more than I need. The Smart Shooter, I think, has now been bought out fully by Tether Tools, and they've changed their pricing model, so it's not the bargain it used to be.
Okay. So. Cool. Could you walk us through the creative process when you're conceptualizing an image, whether you're working on location? I think the next image is on location, so let's use that one as an example.
This one's a good one to talk about, because we had no plan.
Okay.
Seda and I thought we'd meet for coffee and we wander about London and make some pictures. It was that simple. I had a friend along, Ash, who kindly agreed to hold a light for me, and it's really useful to have someone along. It increases the scope of what you can do. I would normally take a light on location anyway, just because I can't help myself. But to have someone else there meant we could work a bit faster. We were bimbling around near Tower Bridge, and I spotted this extraordinary building. It's a insurance broker, something like that. And I thought it would be swarming with security the minute we started taking pictures. And so I went and sat down on a bench with my camera, and I worked out the composition. I left Seda and Ash behind, and I spent a couple of minutes just chilling. And so I knew I wanted the angles. I don't like shooting straight onto a wall very often. I think most photographers get stuck with put the thing in the middle, shoot straight onto a wall. And the next step beyond that, they get to rule of thirds, which we'll maybe talk about later. I wanted the sun flare coming over the building, because there's a compositional principle called aerial perspective. It gives a little bit of flare, it reduces the contrast, it gives more sense of depth. I wanted the leading lines. I wanted this kind of complexity of shapes. And I like the trees giving that little organic touch as well. Anyway, so I got my composition more or less sorted. Then I left this plaza and stepped a little further away, worked out where I was going to put a light relative to Seda and what power it was going to be. We had a quick test shot at the right, I guess, the distances. And then the three of us sort of sloped in, maybe took 12 frames, and left again before anyone knew what we were up to. I don't know whether it was a public space or not. You can shoot anywhere until you're told you're not allowed to, is the rule. Some places are very quick to tell you you're not allowed to.
Very good. So are you using speedlight or
this was the
battery flash, or what are you using?
So this is AD200 Pro with the ring flash head on it, on the end of a pole. The ring flash with the silver disc reflector around it, it's really good off-camera flash. It's windproof, more or less, and somehow it gives a sense. I think it must be due. I've not done the test to prove it. I think it must be due to the lack of a hotspot in the middle. It gives a sense of being much bigger than it is. So it's a really good trick, because you wouldn't know that was actually such a tiny light, really.
You mentioned the name of that flash. You said so fast.
The Godox AD200 Pro.
Oh, Godox. Okay, sorry.
And then they have a separate ring flash head, and then they have a silver disc reflector, which enlarges it, basically.
Very good.
Chris
you mentioned
that one. Name check, Chris. He said, get one of these. He was right. So.
You mentioned about just somebody along to help you out on this shoot, but you also mentioned earlier on about you like to work with a big team as well.
I enjoy. Yeah. Sorry. Finish the question.
What's your favourite part of a big team shoot and how you manage the logistics and everything else?
I think it's not the satisfaction from getting everyone to dance to my tune. It is truly a shared creative endeavour, especially for a collaboration. Everyone's trying to achieve the same thing. Everyone's trying to work to it. But when it comes to the shoot itself, I'm the one running it. I'm the one in charge. I'm the one responsible for making sure all the bits get shot in time, that everyone's happy. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the team bit maybe when we get onto the shot from Ely Cathedral, because that's
okay. Brilliant.
A good
and as far as kind of aperture choice for this kind of image and lens choice,
it's dictated by the lighting. To be honest, the power of the sun dictated how bright the flash had to be, and then after that, I was fairly limited. I was working with a standard 24-70 zoom, so I just went in at f4. So that it meant that the flash didn't have to work too hard. It was. Yeah.
And are you purposely overpowering the sun or matching the sun, or what are you?
So the light is coming from the same side as the sun, and it's sort of matching it. So the sun's doing the rim light, and actually the exposure on Sailor wouldn't be too bad without the flash. But she doesn't have the contrast. The contrast on here comes purely from the flash and the drama and the shine from the sequins. Yeah. I'm trying to think how best to describe the process. So in cinematography, they call it wrapping the ambient. I was extending the ambient light around with flash. It's on the same side. It feels like the light on, say, that could be from the sun, until you look closely at it, and you can see that it clearly couldn't. The side you can see would be in the shade. If I'd put the flash on the other side of it would have looked much more dramatic, but much less natural.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, for something which looks like natural light, but enhanced.
What's your process for managing colour at the time of the shoot? These are the techie questions we got in.
Okay, so managing colour, pick a white balance. I don't care what it is, almost. I think if you allow the camera to do it on auto, it swaps from one shot to the next, and you can't trust what you're seeing when you're comparing images, because warmer images are always more appealing to the eye. So if a camera says this one's warmer, you'll think that's better. If it's consistent, then you can easily change your white balance later. I would say don't trust the back of the camera in either bright sunshine or a dark studio. In my early days of studio work, I was out by 3 stops because I was trusting the back of the camera. At least look at the histogram if you haven't got a light meter. I know people don't like light meters. I wouldn't use one on a shot like this, but I can't see why you wouldn't in the studio.
And if you were kind of doing this shot, do you shoot a grey card or anything, or do you shoot anything?
Not for this one. It was so fast. In the studio, I often shoot a grey card and then ignore it. I've got one of those 24 colour patch things, which I use for product stuff when I do product stuff. And I need absolute colour accuracy. But really, there's always some colour grade on at the end. I've got a well-calibrated monitor, so I can trust that. But I'm not normally worried about colour accuracy. So the colours in this one are quite interesting. It's a colour grade. It's a classic teal orange thing that you use in cinematography. There's a reason they use it. It's warm colours appear closer to the eye than cool colours. So it increases the sense of depth still further. It makes it more three-dimensionality, gives it more three-dimensionality, which is what we're trying to do with most pictures. We want to make things look three-dimensional. Yeah.
And did you purposely want this, big depth of field in this image? Because obviously everything's sharp, isn't it?
Fairly. Did I say effort? It probably wasn't effort. No, it was, the aperture was set to keep the sun under control, and then everything else followed from there.
Okay.
So the sharpness of the lines is nice, but it was not an essential.
Cool. How do you adapt your lighting technique to enhance expressive movement in contemporary dance and modern circus-like photography? Good question, whoever did that one. And good choice of image when we get to it as well. That's pure luck, that is.
Yeah.
How do you adapt your lighting technique? Sorry.
How do you say the full question again? It's a long one.
Yeah. How do you adapt your lighting techniques to enhance expressive movement in contemporary dance, modern circus photography kind of thing?
The studio, I usually do things which really show the shape and really show the physique, because that's what the subjects want. They don't want me getting all creative over their hard-won skills. Sometimes I will, and I'll do something which doesn't, but basically they just want a well-lit thing which looks like the first shot we had of Pavel and Ola, almost a product shot. Is perhaps not the most creative. It's kind of putting all the emphasis on the creativity in the hands of the people in front of the camera. And if that's what they want, I'm happy to do that. This image is a little different. So I quite often work with Tabitha Boydell, who runs events for photographers on locations, often ballet themed. And I usually get a few minutes. Well, if I do lights for Tabitha, she runs the event. So I'll always take a few test shots. And if I'm lucky and the dancers and models are willing, I'll say, do you fancy making a picture if I get all the lights set up before the punters arrive? And the sun came out, and I asked Sophie Farquhar, she's called, just show me your signature move. And I just put the camera down. She showed me this. So, okay, I know what we'll do with that. And then I put her in this patch of sunshine, and then I just added some fill from a high, and I put my flash in high-speed sync mode. I don't normally use high-speed sync with dancers, but I was working quickly to get everything done before the customers arrived. Do the thing again. Nope, she was standing in the wrong place. Do it a second time. Take a step backwards. There we go. Job done. It's sunshine and fill at high-speed sync.
I've got another question that is relevant to this, but I flip us right back to the beginning where we talked about your experience with dance and kind of a performance and so on with it. When you see an image and you've got a leg like that, do you just let it go, or are you freaking out because it's not straight and everything else? Because there's the saying, isn't there, in portrait photography or people photography,
ideally she would have got her weight further over. The back leg bend is fine. We spent a couple of minutes without her throwing the leg up in the air to work out where she was going to put her arms. I want to be able to read both arms. Very often dancers have their arms parallel, so one hides the other, and that looks a bit odd to me. I want to be able to see both. The back leg straight is fine. Her weight's not quite forward enough for me, ideally. You see the bottom leg's not quite vertical, but everything else about it was so good, you just have to let it go.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was trying to get to, because some dancers would look at that and that bent leg at the top is unacceptable. They do it again and again and again and again, and wouldn't they?
No, she was happy with it. So I would always check the dancer that they're happy with, especially foot shape and hand shape. I would never use a picture they weren't happy with. But there comes a point where it loses all life. You do it too many times. It just looks like work, and you start to see the work in the shoulders and the neck. If you don't get it, move on. There's always a compromise somewhere. All photography has a compromise, unless you're, say, Richard Avedon and you've got a budget of millions for every shoot.
Okay, so your subheading for today, obviously about dance and fashion, is about making, not taking, or taking, not making, or whichever you want to do.
Yes, making, not taking. So
yeah, talk me through that the concept then, with kind of this image. What's in your head? What's triggering? Because you've got a lot going on up here, I can tell. And basically I'm trying to get it out more of you.
Okay.
So talk to me about why it's you see this as making and not just taking a photograph.
Okay, so let's think where to start. I don't want to just dissect the photo in itself. I could do that compositionally. I knew I wanted to do something in the direct sunshine. I was there to do lighting. Ignore that. When the natural light's that good, then I'll use it. I wanted to do something where Sophie got a chance to do something really expressive. We only had 5 minutes on this, so to say we were making it is slightly exaggerating. I got her to show me a mood that she was really proud of, that she really enjoyed performing, that she knew looked good. Tabitha provided this amazing draped gown. It just looked beautiful. And then it was a little process of working out where she was going to stand, how I was going to light her, how we were going to position the arms, where I was going to be compositionally. And all of those things we worked out before I started pressing the button and using the flash. I knew all that before I started trying to take the picture. So, and even when we knew how the arms were going to be, I got her to do this move a few times without taking any photos. Just look at it. Take your time, look at it, and then see how it's going to look. There were a couple of others. This one I liked because the hand and foot were in the clear space in the center of the image. They read well. The arms are beautiful and you can see them both. I like the complexity. There's 2 sets of diagonal lines going on the floor in different directions. So the one's from the shadow in one direction, then there's the leading lines of the floorboards in another. And the way they join provides a point of focus, which is exactly where her foot is. Mm-hmm. And then happily, there's this curved bit at the top as well, which kind of just brings another shape to the whole thing. So there's lots going on compositionally. There's all of these diagonal lines, there's horizontal lines, there's curved lines, and then right in the middle there's this contrasty, absurd shape that the dancers spent years perfecting.
And
so I feel like I'm whispering.
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to understand, and if I can understand it, people watching, I hope, can understand it more. Okay, so last question on this image for a minute. How do you approach lighting for dance and movement to capture the energy and flow of the performer? Nice question. Well done.
Yeah, so in this case, it really was a case of controlling the contrast level so I could use the natural light but not have things completely dark or completely blown. There was nothing. And the light was, I seem to remember, just a standard 7-inch dish and a big old 1200 flash unit bounced off the wall behind me. High speed scene. Normally, so we have to worry about flash duration when we're photographing dancers. That's a real issue. If hands are meant to look sharp and they're not, because the flash pulse is too long, then that's an issue. So I'll do things like reduce the flash power. If I can, if there's still ambient there, then I have to take some other measures. I work 2 very different ways with dancers. One will be to get them to find a pose. We'll find a shape, we'll refine it, we'll now do it and take the picture. And sometimes I'll just put some music on, especially for commercial dancers, and say, right, off you go. And I'll shoot like a psychopath. And I'll try and hit every beat in the music. So I know their dancer's going to hit the beat. If I do too, I'm going to get something. Yep. And then just accept that, say again, for commercial in particular, it's not, commercial dance doesn't always make very pretty shapes. So you're just hoping to capture that energy and the bum wiggling, frankly, the bum wiggling and the hair flying.
Cool.
So I wouldn't try and stage it. Yeah.
Do you have a kind of a go-to lighting? So ignore this image for a minute, but do you have a go-to lighting setup for location shoots versus studio shoots? How does it work in your head?
So when I do Tabitha's things, I try to reproduce the sort of light she tends to use for her own shoots, because it's her events, people are buying into her aesthetic.
Yeah.
So which tends to be very directional, but very soft. So I quite often use a 3 meter by 3 meter silk with a light and a brolly either bounced off a wall or firing through it. So it's a massive softbox essentially, and I'll flag the ends off with huge, like 6 foot, 8 foot black flags just to control it a bit. Very often I'll just bounce a light off a corner of a room. It'll look like it's just crudely put there, bounce it off a corner, but I'll tweak it. A couple of inches will make a difference. Because I'm trying to reproduce the natural light that's there, but make it usable. Sometimes though, I'll just ignore the natural light that's there and do whatever I like in a studio style. I don't have a one go-to. I start thinking about lighting from what mood do I want to create. I've got a reasonably wide skill set. I don't have a standard approach. If I want drama and angles, then I need shadows with hard edges. And if they're there in natural light, great. And if I don't, then I'll make them myself. If I want something more floaty and dreamy, then I might use backlighting in conjunction with uplighting, perhaps. And I might deliberately introduce some flare or some motion blur. It's the subject and the story and the mood dictates the lighting. I don't go, well, today I'm going to do rim lighting, or today I'm going to do gels. I do that. I do that occasionally, of course. But normally I'll say, what's the mood? What's the story we're trying to tell? How can my light enhance that within the limits of the location?
So let's talk about this next image.
So this was Seda again, lovely Seda. I work with her a lot because she's great. So this, my friends, our ex next door neighbours, were very luckily managed to find a plot of land and built their own house on it. And it's this beautiful modern space. And I just thought the aesthetic of the place would suit Seda's style beautifully. She's very minimal, clean lines, quite kind of somewhere between techno and goth in her own personal styling. So we wandered up to their house. They gave me the run of the place for an afternoon, and I was struggling. I was really struggling. It was so, there were no curtains, no blinds anywhere. The sunshine was streaming in, coming and going. I had no idea what I was trying to do. We had an idea we were going to use colours a lot, maybe, and do some gel stuff. It was probably an error. I probably shouldn't have started at that point. But this one, I just like the angles again, the contrast and the shapes. So I was shooting through a huge window. There was a blue gelled fill light bouncing off a wall inside, and it's just the diagonals of the shadows from the sunshine just led directly to Seda's face. Just really neat. And it's quite a complex composition again. There's horizontal lines, there's vertical lines, there's diagonal lines. Maybe now's the time. I think the rule of thirds gets people very stuck. It's a very static composition. A few years ago, excuse me, I got slightly tired of reading or being told composition can't be taught. Either you've got it or I haven't. And I thought that can't be true. And I set about acquiring books on composition, mainly aimed at painters. But the thing which really stuck with me, and maybe it's my math background, was this idea called dynamic symmetry, which is a bit based on golden ratio. Basically, it means make stuff line up with the diagonals and use those as the lines which lead the eye around the image. When you look at an image, your eye is quite hard to see, but your eye will move around it. It will enter an image somewhere and it will follow it around, and it will leave the image if you've got compositional elements which lead the eye out again. And sometimes you can use that if you want to make something really challenging, hard to look at. Maybe you'll have something which leads the eye out of the image. In this one, everything leads straight into Seda's face. These kind of sinuous lines of her own dress, the diagonals. She's nicely framed by a few other bits of pieces of horizontals and verticals. I've used colour in the composition. The fill light makes the wall look further away than it is because it's blue, it's teal. We talked about that before. It's deliberately three-dimensional.
Thank you. You mentioned a question just come through about, you said a blue gel is being bounced. Is that a CTB? Is that a full or half, or
I've no idea.
Or just blue
It
will
will
gel?
have been some bluey, greeny thing that was in my bag at the time, and I will have tweaked the colours a little bit in post.
Okay.
Yeah, it will have. Yeah, it's probably a bit tealish.
Okay. Our next image.
Now this was a huge one. So I work. This is Rohini Bilani. She's a fashion editor and model for a local regional magazine. It's quite a big, free lifestyle mag which covers all of East Anglia. And every now and again they ask us to do a cover story editorial. So we use local designers and local locations and shoot a front cover, and usually a 6-page spread inside as well. And we'd spent ages talking to better not name them just in case, talking to a famous museum in Cambridge about doing a shoot there. And they were very keen right up to the point that they stopped being keen and got a committee of 10 people involved. And the day of the shoot was coming up. We had the hairstylist, we had the designer, we had the milliner, we had the magazine staff, we had everybody lined up. And so we gave up on the museum because they were just being so awkward and called Ely Cathedral up. And they said, yeah, okay, I'll just check with the deanery. And the next day they said, yep, come and use the cathedral. They gave us the run of the cathedral for a day. And so there must have been a team of 10 on this one. By the time we got 2 makeup artists and all of the cathedral staff and everybody else. And the cathedral was still open to the public. And the King's School at Ely were in and out doing their assemblies and concert practice and all the work. So we were working around it. And the space was enormous. The most difficult thing I think about working in big spaces is how long it takes to do anything. Just moving around the space because you forgot, I don't know, a lens cloth takes ages. Ah, yes, and here's behind the scenes for this one. So a friend, Drew Tommins, had told me about a fashion photographer called Bruce Smith, who he wrote a book on how to shoot editorials. I think he died recently. And he was a master of doing interesting things with natural light. So Drew described this one too. It's basically a scrim, so a diffuser hanging on the stand, and then bouncing some light under the diffuser up into Rennie's face. If you go back to the resulting image, you'll see it's actually uplighting on her face. Normally we avoid uplighting, but I really like it. It is a natural light, but it's a fairly unnatural natural light. Normally natural light comes from above us. And my thinking is that if light is unnatural and you can't quite tell why, because it's only just slightly unnatural, it's very eye-catching. People notice it, but they can't put their finger on what it is they've noticed. So yeah, the silver reflector was doing the uplighting, and then if you go back to the BTS, and you'll see there's a 8600 600 battery flash bouncing at the wall, and that was again balancing the shadows, controlling the contrast. It was just doing some fill, randomly bouncing it around the space. I could have done something more sophisticated with fill if we'd had more time, I think, but it was working, so I didn't need to change it.
Very good. And when you're doing these kind of shoots, is it just one government, or is there lots of governments being shot?
Oh no, there'll be 5 or 6 looks during the day. So yeah, it'll be a full day. We'll get in at 8. We'll be finished by 5 if we're lucky. We'll change hair and makeup for every look as well. We'll usually work each location in the space a little. So I use 2-3 different locations. In this is a lady chapel and different lighting setups here, just to get a little bit of variety. And remembering detailed shots for the hat maker and the jewelers as well is really important for these things, to make sure that everyone who's contributed to an editorial gets their details. Otherwise, it's all very well having a makeup artist and a hairstylist, but if they're just tiny details in a wide shot, they're not going to be best pleased. Okay. So an editorial, I think, again, Bruce Smith said this, and I entirely agree with him. You can do 5 looks in a day. 6 is pushing it. You do 2 in the morning, and then when everyone's got their eye in, 3 in the afternoon after lunch. And that's a nice steady rate to work.
Next image.
So this is me deliberately trying to get much looser and freer and less organized. And partly because it was the same designer as the dress in the previous shot, actually. She asked me to photograph some veils. She does a lot of bridal work. She said, "Oh, can you photograph some veils for me, Simon? Just don't do the normal thing with them. Don't do something interesting." So we did this. And this was Cedric had come up for a one-to-one workshop I was running, so we only had like half an hour after the end of that to make some pictures. And we tried a few different things. And then in the end, I just got under the veil with her and shot wide open. I think it must have been f4 and 24mm. And trust, I wasn't really looking through the lens at all, because you can see there's a prism there at the top left with those stripes just coming over the mouth. And I was just shooting really fast and waving the prism around and hoping at this point. And she was, and we put some loud tunes on and she was jumping about all over the place. This was not a planned image in any sense of the word. It was created. I gave her the space to do that. I said, I knew the lighting is kind of backlighting combined with uplighting again, was going to work fine. I knew that I would get some in focus. I knew the prism would deliberately add randomness, and the movement, as Seda was doing, would probably make something interesting if I took enough pictures. But I didn't try and choreograph it and say, oh no, we'll just hide everything except your mouth, and that'll be really interesting. There's no, right, let's just jump around to see what we can make. It's completely different to the first shot. I couldn't have made this 10 years ago.
Okay. And you mentioned prisms there. Do you use a lot of prism or glass or crystals in front of the lens? Or
not really. I get lucky with it occasionally. I like using the wrapper from greetings cards around the lens. They're kind of crisp, crinkly, cellophane stuff. It only works really if you've got a light bouncing back into it to give some flair. It's useful for adding another layer. I think we want layers in an image to make them seem three-dimensional. And yeah, adding a bit of flair or haze or something between the subject and the lens just adds that little bit of three-dimensionality again. It's back to stopping everything being flat.
Very good. And going back technical for a minute and things, any lens choice on this image, aperture and kind of things? What's your go-to?
I wanted to get right close up, so I will have put my 24 to 120 f4 on, because that's my widest lens on my Z8. And I will have gone straight up to 24 or 35. I shoot a lot at 35mm. I think when working with a model, yes, everyone says, oh, portraits, 85. Make sure you get a nice frame face. Yes, if it's what their face needs to flatter them, and they're looking straight at the camera. But I get a better interaction with the subject if I'm closer than rather if I'm down the other end of the room. So I would much prefer to shoot at 50. If the studio allows, I won't get too much background crud in.
Yeah.
And for something like this, where it's at, I was under the veil too. We were right up close. It was 24. So it's kind of, it's dictated by the needs of the shot rather than, oh, I'm going to shoot at 24 today or 35 today.
Where do you find inspiration for your personal photography projects before we get to these last three images?
Music, often, oddly. So again, if you have to skip back to, I think, to the second image of Seda with the studio with strip box behind her. My taste in music has always been eclectic. I always say I've got something to offend every taste. That one. So at the moment, I'm listening to quite a lot of avant-garde classical stuff and Swedish techno. And this is kind of inspired by the Swedish techno scene. What else? I do rely on the people in my pictures to provide some of the creative input. The people I would choose to work with are ones I know will provide something interesting, but I couldn't pin down what that is exactly. So yeah, I will perhaps choose the person for my personal stuff. I'll choose the person first and then see where we go from there. Which means most of the people I work with are women, not all, but most. They're a wide range of ages. They're not all young models. They're not all very traditional fashion models. They're people I think will understand how I work and want to make something with me, even if it's not showy. A lot of the stuff we've seen today is very showy. I really enjoy very simple, intimate portraiture, almost unretouched, just sitting down by a window, chatting, and see if we can make something really engaging. Should have included some of those things really as well.
We will get to these last three images, I promise you. What advice would you give to photographers who want to break into, dance or fashion, commercial photography and things, really? Any advice for them?
Make sure you know the right people for fashion. But yeah, be true to what you like. Be selective about what you shoot. I shoot all sorts of stuff. I know my portfolio is all over the place. If you want to shoot fashion, people will go to you because they know what they're going to get from you. Jake Hicks is a prime example. Everyone knows what they'll get from Jake Hicks. They'll get funky colours, beautifully retouched. You need a unique selling point to sell fashion stuff, and stick to it. Dance stuff is a bit different. It's slightly more commercial. It's slightly it depends who you're selling it to. Are you selling it to the dancers or to their schools or to their mums and dads? And at one end, selling it to the mums and dads is kind of easy. It's a kind of highly refined school photography.
Okay, let's talk about the first image then.
So I put these three together because they were all taken as test shots on one of Tabitha's events, but they're all taken in. So they're notionally very similar, but they were made in completely different ways. So it sums up the kind of subject of the talk quite well, I think. So this was a gap. Erica was having a little rest while some people worked with another dancer. I was wandering around making sure everyone was happy, and I spotted this little patch of natural light through a doorway. And I asked Erica, "Are you busy?" "No," she said. "Do you want to make a picture?" "Okay then." So she wandered down this passage. I got my exposure sorted. I said, "Right, pop up on fifth, put your arms in fifth, but turn them sideways so you can see them both. No, take a step forward, click, job done." That was it. It was really fast. It was made, but it was very fast.
And how much post-production are you doing to
on this one?
Yeah.
So that's a good question. If I'm spending more than 15 minutes on an image, then I think something's gone wrong. I do post-process, and I spend a long time, especially on backgrounds. I do some skin work, especially for beauty stuff. I'll do skin work, obviously, but it's all about cleaning up the composition, making sure that the focus is where I want it to be. So I think I've probably removed a fire extinguisher from the background, and I will have gone to some trouble to really square everything up and make sure all verticals are vertical in this one. And it was just a hint of detail in the shadows.
And the next image?
So this one, no, I actually made some notes on this one. So this was the same event, but this took a long time to refine the pose and the lighting. This was shot with so the sun was coming and going. You can see the actual sunlight on the floor. This had a 3-meter square silk off to the left where Daniel's looking. So again, it was wrapping the ambient, providing a great big softbox, but to the side of the windows to give the effect that the ambient light was coming around the side to do the job. And I wanted to do something which captured a sense of the height of the place, some of the grandeur of it. Ideally, Daniel would have been framed more centrally in the window. And I have got one picture where he was framed in the window, not front of the pillar, but his shape wasn't so good, so we didn't use that one. And I said, "Oh, just do a jump for me," and he jumped. And once I'd seen him do one jump, it was kind of obvious what I needed to do from there. I needed him to make a shape which fit with everything else, so I asked him to bend, really bend and curve. And then standing on the ground, this was, I got him to bend over, and worked out where his head would need to be, and then got him to do a few jumps. And after the third or fourth, they were starting to go off. Anyway, they were losing their energy. He was losing the cool, and I had other stuff to go and do. So we spent a good while working out what we were going to do, and then not very long shooting it.
And questions just come through about.
Go on.
Sorry, the questions just come through here about shutter speed. Is there a preferred shutter speed when you're shooting this kind of image?
This will be 200th of a second, maximum sync speed, because I'm using flash. If you catch someone at the peak of movement and they're not whipping their arms from one side to the other, you don't need to go that fast. And flash duration is not a problem. It's only a problem where you're genuinely trying to freeze them. But if someone's at peak of movement, it's not an issue. Focusing can be a challenge, but I always back button focus, I think. Even with mirrorless and the eye tracking, I still use back button focus, hold my thumb on that and click away on the other one. And this one, yeah, I don't use rapid fire, partly because flash won't keep up with me. Partly, I think, if you're using continuous or servo, whatever you want to call it, you're almost, it's changed a little bit with the latest cameras, but you're almost guaranteed to miss the moment. You're going to bracket it. You're not going to get the moment. You're going to get either side of it. So I would much rather watch the movement. And dancers will repeat things exactly the same every time. You ask them to do a thing, they will do it. You say, turn your hand this way, they'll do it again with the hand turned. So you don't need to worry about that. You just look at it and then press the button at the right time. It's that easy.
Very good. And the last image?
This is a complete contrast to the previous one. So the lighting took forever on this one, whereas the pose, because Xenia is Russian. She's a model and a studio owner and a damn good photographer herself, and a Russian ballerina in a former life. So I got. So this was what the natural light looked like, but it was very, very dark and a bit lacking direction, really. So just round the corner at the top of the stairs, I had a 600 watt strobe with one of those long throw high efficiency reflectors on it, firing through a window, which then bounces off a wall outside, just in front of the windows, just to the right of the frame there, then bounces back through those windows and onto Xenia. And it took forever to fettle that and to stop light spilling all around the top of the staircase. I mean, really, it was up and downstairs. I already got my steps in that day. But then, having got the lighting right, said, right, Xenia, can you come up with a shape here? Don't lift your head up too much because the light's coming slightly from below you. So we don't want the uplighting on the face. And just do something. Ooh, that was nice. Lift your arm a bit higher and make sure I can just see both feet. Do it again. Job done. It was really quick. But the lighting took me a good 40 minutes to get that one nailed.
Okay, good. Simon, absolutely brilliant. Simon Carter can be found on his Purple Port page, of course. If you want to go and read or see more of Simon's work, then actually get over towards here and things. There was a question through about, could you share a story behind one of your favourite images featured in UK or Tatler?
So that's a good question. The advert, the best way to get in Elle or Tatler or Vogue or anywhere else is for someone else to pay you and then pay to put an advert in the magazine. They're not commissioned by the magazine. I've never yet been commissioned by a magazine at that scale to shoot an editorial, and I have absolutely no idea how you do get those roles. I think it's through agents, but even photographers, agents don't seem to be much use of that kind of thing, because I have investigated. It's being on the steps of Soho House, I think. So I couldn't tell you the story, but they were commercial images.
Commercial images. Okay.
My tagline, but slightly disingenuous, perhaps.
Okay. So you've got a couple of workshops coming off in the next few months and things. Talk to me about that. I know on the events you've talked about Tabitha, and she's with us, in fact, on the 13th of November. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
No.
Yeah, she's doing a session here with us on the 13th of November. So it'd be really good to actually...
I so much admire her work because I see so many things in her work which I don't see in my own, I think. So, yeah.
Cool. But you're doing some workshops. What can people expect when they come on a workshop with you?
I don't teach setups. I teach a way of thinking about lighting. These workshops are a little different. They are deliberately using obscure setups. But normally if people come to me for a workshop, especially one-to-one, typically ideally what I'll do is, I know it's an investment. I'll do one session, which is technical stuff. It's how do we control shadows? How do we control light? It'll often be using improvised lights, like bouncing things off walls or using bits of cardboard to flag them. It's just really understanding light and shadow and where to put them and how. And then the second session will be, I've talked about mood, thinking about what mood do we need to create for this shot, this brief, this story, this outfit. Now use the skills from the previous session to tell that story. How do we do that? And so I'll guide people through that process. I think it's the idea is that they can go away. They may not be expert, but they'll know what they can achieve and why they're trying to achieve it, I think, is what I hope to convey.
Cool. And are these taught in your personal studio?
So they're mainly in my studio in Saffron Walden. I'll travel anywhere to teach. I occasionally go other places. I don't have a regular teaching schedule. I usually wait till someone approaches me and then I say, yep, okay, I'll do that. That may change. The ones at Aura, I say the morning one is very much looking at obscure lighting techniques, particularly things like midday sun. How do you use midday sun effectively in a studio? How do you use uplighting effectively? What odd things can you do to abuse a softbox and still get interesting images out of it? That kind of stuff. And the afternoon is more of a portfolio builder session. People can come and take pictures, but I won't explain.
Very good. So
I'm happy,
last but
I'm happy to take questions via email if people want to drop me a line.
Thank you very much.
I can't promise I'll answer them all in a timely fashion, but I'll do my best. So.
Very good. Last but no means least, just last question to finish off with, if that's okay, from Darren. What trends or shifts do you see in the kind of the fashion dance photography in the next few years? You know, are you seeing trends beginning to emerge? Is there anything that you can kind of point photographers who are keen on fashion dance to kind of be looking towards?
Video. I don't think in terms of video. I'm not trying to do it. I don't remember sequences from films. I remember still images. I'm resolutely sticking to still images. But videos are really the thing to do, I think. Yeah, whether it's Reels for Instagram or it's all about the 6-second clip.
Yeah. Simon,
would you
thank
agree?
you.
Your experience? You've done, Mark, you've done the whole commercial photography thing. Would you agree? It's all about video these days?
No, I think it's sticking to what you're good at, and obviously, you know, as much as you can pay attention to trend. It was interesting, the question. I was expecting it from Darren in many ways, because he's fixated on the future and kind of somebody's got the fairy dust. There isn't any. It's just kind of working and playing.
It's about what you point it at.
Yeah.
The rest is details. I always say this at the end of my tuition sessions. It's not about the lighting. The lighting is a gimmick to enhance what you're pointing it at. It's not about the processing or the camera. It's about what you're pointing at. And it's about, if it's a person, it's about your connection to what you're pointing at. And the rest is details. They're important details, but they're details.
I think when you're looking at fashion and dance photography, you know, you're either going to capture the image or you're going to allow the image to create. You're going to either want a very sharp image or you're going to want motion and emotion, as it were. But again, it's everything for everybody, really. As far as commercial photography is concerned, why you get booked as a commercial photographer in the beginning, you're lucky. But when you're actually getting booked as a commercial photographer in longevity, it's because you're delivering the goods every time. So when we're looking at shifts in trends and everything else with it, well, that's good, and that's what they are paying you for. But that's in your book. If you should always be 1 year ahead in your book. So in other words, clients will be booking you tomorrow based on ideas you created for yourself, based on what you were doing last year, rather than actually what you're going to create. They're booking you on what you have done, not what you can do. They need proof in the pudding on that. And because when they are, you know, you explained about putting big teams together, whether it's a team of 2 or a team of 22 on a shoot, basically you've got to deliver, because it's an expensive.
Yes, correct. And not many people get to practice working with a big team. I'd be very lucky, I think.
But, very good. Simon, thank you very, very much, and good luck with your endeavours. And I look forward to actually seeing more of your work on Purple Port. And if you want some more information, as I said, about Simon and his photography, obviously check out his Instagram or his Purple Port account. Thanks everybody. Take care, everybody. Good night.